Hey, it's 2020 and I'm going to talk about one of my favorite things, classic video games. I love what SEGA Ages has been doing with the Nintendo Switch. They've been releasing a lot of their old classic Genesis games and arcade games, and I've got two space shooters here to talk about from the Thunder Force franchise, Thunder Force 3 and Thunder Force 4, although they're not called that. It's a little bit confusing. I've got Lightning Force, Quest for the Darkstar, which was the Genesis version of Thunder Force 4, and I've got Thunder Force AC, which was the arcade port of Thunder Force 3 for the SEGA Genesis. It's very confusing, and this series is kind of confusing because it was ported to many different systems. It started in the 80s. It's always been a space shooter franchise where you've got lots of interesting environments to navigate through and lots of crazy biological / mechanical enemies to defeat with lots of cool weaponry. Thunder Force 3 and 4, which are the core games that I'm playing right now, both deliver that, and it's also quite interesting to see that there's definitely a uniqueness to the arcade experience in Thunder Force AC. And there is an absolute Genesis quality coming off of Lightning Force, Quest for the Darkstar. And they're both great. And, so what I can say is that because they're all, taking from a lot of the same cues, there's a lot of similarities in the way that these games play. You can pick up satellite ships, and they'll give you extra bonus firepower. You've got a bunch of different weapon types that you can pick up that will shoot ahead of you, but also behind you. I particularly love wave weapons that sort of scatter across the whole screen and take out enemies kind of en masse. I like all that. You also have the ability to speed up and slow down your craft, and it's not necessarily that you're flying faster through the worlds or through the environments. It's just that you have a quicker kind of pace to your mobility. So sometimes that helps if you're trying to navigate through a tiny crevice or something like that in the level design. And sometimes you've got sort of moving objects that come into play that will just appear out of nowhere, and so you've got to be quick and you've got to be patient because there's a lot of cheapness in both of these games. The games at their core feel quite similar, but because of the arcade wrappings in Thunder Force AC, which is the more recent release from SEGA Ages, it does that thing where it creates an arcade machine for you to kind of be looking at as your wallpaper, and in the background you can see, Outrun and an old SEGA Flight Combat game in the background sort of blurred out. I love that. I think that SEGA Ages and with this collection of these ports of classic arcade games could definitely package a bunch together and let us traipse around inside of a SEGA classic arcade. It would be so fun. I really did appreciate that aesthetic and that sense that I'm inside of this old 90s arcade playing this old shoot 'em up. But I'm also incredibly impressed with Lightning Force in the fact that this ran so beautifully on the SEGA Genesis, and of course I've been reviewing a lot of Genesis games with the Genesis Mini, and I love that Genesis collection that I also have on my Switch. So I've been playing a lot of SEGA Genesis games over the last few months, and this isn't included in those. So it's not in that recent SEGA Genesis collection that you pick up for modern consoles or the Mini Genesis, so it's a standalone thing. But there also have been a tremendous amount of shooters packaged with mini consoles, like the recent TurboGrafx. There are shoot-em-ups included in Genesis collections as well. So your move towards picking up either one of these shooters really has to depend upon either your awareness or your fondness for Thunder Force as a franchise, or you just love this genre of game. And I can tell you that both of these games absolutely deliver. Another sort of commonality that both of these titles share is their incredible difficulty. You're going to have enemies pop up out of nowhere, and it will be frustrating, and you've got to quickly select the right weaponry for the right moment, because sometimes you're going to have craft that pop up behind you or above you or below you, and you're constantly cycling through your weaponry, and you're constantly cycling through the speed of your craft to kind of contend with all of the minutiae and all of the details that are around you in both titles. I liked the preciseness of the arcade game. It didn't feel like there was any slowdown or much flicker. There is a little bit of that in Lightning Force for the Genesis, but that was kind of appropriate for the hardware of its time, and you kind of have to make peace with that. But this Genesis game is still incredibly impressive still in 2020. The graphics are fantastic. The speed of the game overall is really, really cool. I love the music. I like the sound effects as you're blasting everything, but also when you're picking up weaponry and cycling through different things. Loved all of that. It just incredibly satisfying. But there was something about that arcade experience with Thunder Force AC that really hooked me. I really liked it. Both of these games also deliver a kids mode, so you can experience everything in both titles, so that when you do go back and challenge yourself with the original modes, you'll have a little bit more awareness of what to expect. The Genesis game, Lightning Force, allows you to select your first 4 stages and play them in the order that you want, and then of course it continues on from there. And one thing about both of these titles is that there is a lot of navigation through caverns and through spaceships and things like that, where you've got like a ceiling and a ground part of the level that you can't smash into. But what I would say is that Lightning Force, which was Thunder Force 4, allows you to expand. It just feels like the levels that you get to challenge yourself in give you a lot more freedom, and you can expand and go in different ways. There's some verticality in the scrolling, and it's incredibly impressive. The music is great as well across both of these titles. And you've got a bunch of different wallpaper options, and you've got some CRT scanline things that you can add to this as well. I was impressed as hell by both of these titles. I definitely think that they're for a specific audience, fans of shoot-'em-ups and space shooters, but SEGA Ages is doing some fantastic work. They own the Thunder Force franchise in general, and there were a bunch of games delivered across a bunch of different systems. There was even a Saturn. I just looked in my Saturn collection. I don't have the Thunder Force collection or whatever, the Thunder Force remakes or whatever they made for the Saturn. But there is something there for SEGA Ages to dip back into, or maybe a future Sega shoot-'em-up collection or something like that. I have to say, though, I really enjoyed my time with both of these titles. I think I liked Thunder Force AC just a little bit more because it felt like I was going to the arcade, but I was also immensely impressed by the fidelity and the quality and the eternal enjoyment of Lightning Force Quest for the Darkstar. Both are great pickups. I'm going to give Lightning Force Quest for the Darkstar an 8 out of 10, and I'm going to give Thunder Force AC an 8.5 out of 10. Keep it up, SEGA Ages. I love what you're doing.